Hey, what's up? It's Chris Seiter, founder of Ex-Boyfriend Recovery and Ex-Girlfriend Recovery, and today I'm making this awesome video to show you the 3 most important golden rules that you need to obey if you want your ex back. Now, it's important to think of these 3 rules as the most effective strategies that I've found throughout my 6.5 years of doing this. Now, this is a video where you're absolutely going to want to take notes. If you have a pen, paper, or even like an iPad or something that you can take notes on, that's ideal because the 3 things I talk about here are things that you will absolutely need to perform if you want to get your ex back. Oh yes, but before we get started, the first thing I think you should do is make sure you click on that subscribe button below and click the bell notification. Doing so will give you up-to-date information on whenever I have a new video out and whenever I respond to your comments, because I know I do my very best to respond to every comment I get here on my channel. All right, with that out of the way, let's begin talking about the 3 golden rules you need to obey.
So the very first golden rule that you're going to want to follow and obey if you want to get your ex back is the no contact rule. This is the most common strategy golden rule that most experts out there will talk about, but I don't think people really know the numbers when it comes to the no contact rule. Obviously, it's the most popular tactic to get your ex back, but my own internal studies have found that close to 70% of my successes, people who have used it and gotten their exes back, have actually instituted the no contact rule. So when you see a number that large, it tells you something interesting about its effectiveness. Now, it doesn't work for every single person in every single situation, but for the most part, 70%, a very big majority of my overall success stories have pointed to the no contact rule and said, yes, this has helped me. Also, the really cool part about the no contact rule is there's a lot of psychological precedents proving that it works. It actually institutes a lot of psychology, right? So the theory of reactance is one of those psychological principles that it institutes. Basically, when we remove a freedom or a behavioral freedom from some person or something, they react in a way to try to get that freedom back. The no contact rule uses that mentality on your ex. You're removing yourself from the equation. You're removing his or her ability to contact you, and that raises the chances that they're going to react to try to contact you or get that freedom back. Now, it doesn't always work the way you think, and close to 80% of my clients actually fail the no contact rule, meaning instead of ignoring their ex for the allotted 30 days or 45 days or 21 days, whatever time frame they choose, they break it when their ex contacts them or asks what's up or says something that kind of freaks them out and makes them think that they actually need to break the no contact rule. So 80% of people fall into that range, but the 20% of people who do complete it actually see really great success. So that's the first golden rule that you need to obey. The second golden rule that you need to obey is ending conversations at the exact right time. This is something that I see a lot of people fail at. Conversations have this interesting flow, right? So when you start a conversation with someone, if it's a decent conversation, and there's all sorts of different flows that conversations can have, but the most general flow is that it will progress until it hits a peak, and then once it hits that peak, the conversation hits its most exciting or most satisfying part, it goes downhill, right? Now, most people wait until the very end of a conversation to end it, after it's already hit that peak and gone way downhill. But instead, what you need to do, let's say that for the sake of argument, you're texting your ex, right? And this is what your flow looks like. Well, what you should do is text your ex, and then once you hit that peak, end the conversation. Now, there's some psychological precedents behind why you should do this as well. It institutes something called the Zeigarnik effect, where basically this states that people remember interrupted or uncompleted tasks better than completed ones. I've talked a lot about this in other YouTube videos. So by ending the conversation here at the high point, it interrupts the conversation because it's so different than what they're used to. Most people are used to staying on the phone. If you're in love with someone or you like someone, you can stay on the phone with hours for that person, Or you can text for hours with that person and not get tired, but eventually the conversation will falter and will stale. The Zeigarnik effect basically states that it's actually more effective if you end the conversation when it gets to the good part, so that your ex is always left wanting more and they always feel like something, they didn't get full closure on the conversation, so they want to come back and continue having a conversation with you. And again, most people let conversations go on way too long, which can ruin the experience. But the thing I also want to point out, the psychological precedents I also want to point out with regards to ending conversations perfectly, is something called the peak end rule. Scientists have found when they did studies on memory, on how people retain memories and what they actually think about when they're thinking about memories, that we actually have better memories on two distinct points of an experience: the peak of the experience and the end of the experience. Meaning the peak is, just to use this graphic, the peak of the experience is that high point, and the end of the experience is that low point. So let me ask you a very simple question. When your ex remembers a conversation that the two of you are having, what would you rather him remember? The low point or the high point? By ending the conversation at the high point, you can make your peak your end. And the final golden rule is something that is my own creation. I can't take necessarily credit for the other two golden rules, but this one is my own creation. This is something called the value chain. Now, what is a value chain? Well, in my opinion, it's the most important thing that you need if you're going to get your ex back. This is essentially your overall game plan to get your ex back. You map it out from start to finish, exactly the big strategies or tactics that you're going to employ to try to win your ex back. And it's really important to make it flexible and adaptable, because things change so quickly on the fly. A lot of people will make their value chain, and I'm actually going to show you an example of a value chain I recommend to most of my clients. A lot of people will make their value chain and stick to it no matter what happens. And that's a mistake. It's important to keep your value chain broad enough to where you can adapt it or change it even if a situation calls for it. Think of it like this. A palm tree is a perfect example of how a value chain should enact, right? Palm trees can bend, right? If during a hurricane, for example, a palm tree can bend, but it won't break, right? It bends to kind of go with the flow. Value chains are much the same way. If you make it too strict and rigid, even though that seems nice on paper, it's easy to break. So this is kind of an example of a value chain that I use for my clients, right? I have it divided up into really looks like 4 or 5 parts here. The first strategy you should always enact, the first thing you should always do when you're trying to get your ex back, is the no contact rule. After the no contact rule has been completed, you want to start texting them, where you build attraction. Once enough attraction has been built through texting, you want to move up to phone calls and build attraction through phone calls there. Once you've built up enough attraction through texting and phone calls, you want to try for a very small in-person date. This is just meant to get them used to seeing you again, right? And of course, attraction gets built there. And then finally, once you've gone on enough small dates, you can try to opt for a romantic date, right? And that's where things start to get really serious. That's where real attraction starts to happen. That's where you can start kissing, start maybe telling them your feelings. And then finally, after that, you are successful. And that's how a value chain should work. But notice how I kept it very broad. I didn't say exactly how you should be texting, what you should be saying on the phone, what you should be doing in in-person interactions, because sometimes you have to alter the value chain. Sometimes you have to change the progression of things.